What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Putin is in mad love with his new toy Oreshnik hypersonic missile. He brags about it every chance he gets. The meeting with the leaders of Kazakhstan, Tajikistan and Belarus, the annual Q&A session with regular people, ordinary briefings with the members of his inner circle, and it almost feels like he is ready to talk about his big rocket with the kids. He also grows more convinced that this non-nuclear but still destructive missile can be used as a method of establishing fear in the eyes of the enemy, because of its obviously sheer power and near impossibility to be intercepted. Some experts even say that the chances to shoot down Oreshnik are the same as if you try to stop a regular bullet mid-flight by shooting another bullet at it. This knowledge gives Putin the confidence to constantly use Oreshnik as an ace up his sleeve during threats and statements to the West. And what makes him not think about the consequences is the absence of word nuclear in the phrase nuclear missile, making it a non-nuclear threat, which notoriously turned Putin into a boy who cried wolves because of his hundreds of nuclear threats which he, never came to life. Now he can actually threaten the world with destructive power, but he will not be branded as a person who used nukes first. Nevertheless, just this sentiment alone does make his inner circle to grow very concerned and doubtful. And there are not too many people in Russia who Putin listens to, but there are still some. And honestly, just by looking at Putin's body language and comparing his very first statements about Oreshnik and what he says right now, it does feel like that he is having second thoughts about continuing his threats in a similar manner. Is it because he is afraid that after too many threats people will stop taking him serious? Or is it because the West will respond with something similar destructive but non-nuclear as well? Well, let's talk about all of this in today's video. Putin insists that his hypersonic ballistic missiles cannot be intercepted. According to his claims, they travel at supersonic speeds and zigzag through the atmosphere like intercontinental warheads, making them impossible to shoot down. The impression is that Ukrainian air defense systems, both homemade and supplied by the West, have zero chances of locking onto these missiles. But let's remember that we have heard these grand statements before. New super drones, advanced stealth bombers, and unstoppable wonder weapons that inevitably fall short of their hype. Oreshnik is a relatively new weapon, so it is obviously not yet fully studied by the enemies of Kremlin of its true capabilities. For now, we have to rely on Putin's words, which is not the first thing you want to do. Even a quick glance at the performance of Russia's air force over the course of the war so far reveals a pattern of overestimation. The war itself started with such promise of taking Kiev in 3 days, so you get the idea. But let's trust Putin for a second. Don't worry, we're going to do this exercise only once. Let's imagine Oreshnik is really hard to intercept. But don't forget, difficulty does not mean impossibility. The entire proposition of unstoppable weapons typically disregards ongoing developments in Western missile defense. Military race works exactly in this fashion. One country develops something absolutely unimaginable, Oreshnik in our case, so that the other country has to come up with never-seen-before state-of-the-art air defense system. Then the first country is forced to innovate and develop even faster and more unpredictable missile, forcing the enemy to rethink the entire air defense concept. The race continues into indefinity. And this is not to mention that Russia's actual production capacity is far more limited than what Russian propaganda gives us. As a result, the unstoppable narrative takes on the flavor of an old propaganda trick. Give the impression that a single successful strike equates to war-winning technology, hoping nobody asks how many such missiles are even in operational service. As usual, the Kremlin's version of unstoppable includes ignoring supply chain problems, maintenance challenges, and the simplest laws of physics. If you remember from one of our previous videos, we calculated that in order for a non-nuclear Oreshnik to reach the destructive force claimed by Putin, the warhead should weigh tens of thousands of tons. And obviously not a single modern rocket is capable of lifting such weights. Well, so there you have it, the myth is busted. Putin's recent speech brought home the idea that these hypersonic missiles can be equipped with either conventional or nuclear warheads, and that Russia can freely switch between the two depending on circumstances, quote-unquote. The notion is reminiscent of stories we heard about earlier weapons. It is basically a nuke, but not really. We are holding back, but only sort of. This ambiguity is precisely what steers international concerns. Nobody is sure if a missile heading their way is going to wipe out a military target with a conventional blast or level an entire city with a nuclear fireball. But is this flexibility a genuine strategic feature or just a rhetorical ground for intimidation? Experts who participated in arms control talks with the old Soviet Union representatives recall that historically Russia's claims frequently masked a fraction of the actual capability. Ballistic missiles can indeed carry a variety of payloads, but upgrading them to nuclear readiness involves logistical steps that cannot be done on a whim. Contrary to the illusions pushed by Kremlin propagandists, there is no convenient switch that flips from conventional to nuclear with a single simple push of a button. There is the warhead designs, the specialized transport, and the command and control protocols. And all these movements, relocations, and hustle will be most certainly seen from the satellites. Satellites, exactly. Something that was non-existent 70 years ago. Pictures of top-secret military bases were only taken either by spies or high-altitude flying planes, both of which are pretty much easier to obviously prevent rather than not landing a satellite in space snap a picture. And that is what is not fully taken into consideration by the regime of Putin. They still rely heavily on Soviet playbook and techniques. Then, there is the necessity of verifying that you will not accidentally trigger a planet-ending chain reaction. There are protocols in place that if you are launching a nuke, you have to warn the other countries. This might sound counterproductive, but if you think about it, it actually makes sense. If the opposite country detects a missile launch from a nuclear state and receives no warnings of it, and then they see that this target is rapidly approaching their country, the military will assume the worst, that it is the nuclear missile, and they will respond doing exactly the same, initiating, obviously, as you can see, the global apocalypse. This is some sort of a circle of responsibility, and even Putin, however mad he may seem, did warn the West about the most recent Oreshnik launch against Dnipro. So he's not crazy enough, just yet, to destroy the entire world and go down with it. He cares about his life a lot. Over the past couple of years, Russian officials have been warning that any direct NATO involvement, be it from the United States, the United Kingdom, or the entire alliance, would be considered as an act of war. In the same breath, they claim that Western arms supplies, including long-range missiles delivered to Ukraine, have rendered the West a legitimate target. But do they truly mean it? Are they prepared to strike a facility in, for example, Poland or Germany, and gamble with a guaranteed NATO retaliation? Almost 3 years of war prove that Putin is not ready. Neither he is willing. He does have advisors 24/7 around him, inner circle members and just plainly friends, kinda, who he can talk to. Because if he is left alone with his thoughts, they can carry him far, far away. For every single one of us watching it is pretty obvious that Putin's army, not even being able to fight effectively against Ukraine, will most certainly not be able to confront the entire NATO. And those people around Putin, it seems, have to constantly remind him of this. At least some Russian military elites appeared well aware of the consequences. Hitting a NATO installation in Eastern Europe would spark a collective defense response that not even the most skillful Kremlin mouthpiece can spin away. Despite the provocative rhetoric, many in Putin's inner circle enjoy the perks of global wealth. Vacations in Mediterranean villas, bank accounts in Switzerland, luxury cars parked in Western capitals. And yes, most of these assets are frozen and inaccessible for the foreseeable future. But even these people live by hope that one day they will take their 400 million euros yacht for a spin around Mediterranean, have lunch in Greece, and then go to bed in their Italian villa drinking antique French wine. So if not for the future and prosperity of Russia, these people want to keep restraining Putin for the sake of their mega boats and castles. because they know if Putin goes down, he will take them with him. These are the same individuals who look physically pained every time Putin pushes the boundaries of the conflict. Indeed, even in the most recent Putin's public appearance, while he talked proudly about Russia's military might, certain faces around him reflected a distinct sort of dread and despair. They have legitimate reasons to be nervous. Losing a conventional showdown with NATO might be the lesser evil compared to the alternative nuclear attack. The tension does not end with missile systems. Talks of negotiations, or even the lack of them, underscore the fundamental rift in how Russia and the West envision any settlement. For the US and its allies, negotiations are typically about de-escalation and restoring some resemblance of peace. For the Kremlin, negotiations often signify an avenue for advancing territorial gains or delaying Western countermeasures until Russia can regroup. And for Putin, actually, there is another reason not to initiate the talks. He thinks that it will make him look weak. He cannot come begging for peace. He needs to push the situation to the point of total desperation, so the other side comes crawling asking for the ceasefire. Well, that's at least the mindset that Putin has. As the war drags on, we see Russia employing an age-old tactic. Keep the conflict simmering just enough to rattle nerves, but not enough to provoke a cataclysmic global catastrophe. And meanwhile, Ukraine keeps asking for more weapons, defensive and offensive, hoping to gain the upper hand before the world loses interest. The truth is that both sides are strapped for resources, manpower and morale. And while Western leaders promise Ukraine that more arms are on the way, domestic politics in Europe and the United States can shift as inflation rises and public frustration with the war sets in. In the midst of all this, we're reminded that every new missile demonstration, every advanced system pushed out by Russian generals is overshadowed by the staggering cost in human lives. Does Putin genuinely believe that these stunts might turn the tide? After all, people stopped taking even actual nuclear threats seriously. Or is it all a part of a strategy to distract from Russia's flawed battlefield progress? The same question hangs over potential negotiations with the West. Is Russia prepared to make real concessions, or is the Kremlin simply buying its time? The war in Ukraine is not about a single city or a missile test. It's about a fundamental clash between Putin's imperial ambitions and a country fighting to preserve its sovereignty. Simple as that. That's where the stakes truly lie, beyond all the references to unstoppable missiles and red lines constantly redrawn on the map. Putin does love his life. He does have people around him who grow more concerned with each day passing. And no matter how much he just wants to end it all with the single press of a button, hoping there will be no response from the West, he understands that this is not possible. Putin is punching the air right now, but he realizes that this is a no-go scenario. And that's precisely why he is having second thoughts all the time about actually proceeding on his threats and promises. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below: PayPal donations, Patreon subscriptions. You can even buy the Russian Dude merch to support my work. All the links once again are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you on Wednesday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in